We're going to do a joined in progress type of thing this week where we just go right into it because you had some questions. Where do you want to start?
We could talk about some of the recent stuff that's going on at the moment. There's been some interesting announcements with...
I don't want to do that.
You don't want to do that?
No. That's what we just talked about when we were WhatsApping to prep for this. And then you're like, no, I got some cool questions. So this is where you want to start? Okay. All right, go for it. Go for it. Oh, now you're going to go to your questions?
I thought we were going to do them last.
No. Oh. See, this is the good part. This is the joined in progress part. Oh, holy crap. You got like a novel on there. Yeah. Okay. See, I got the old analog. You got the digital.
Yeah, okay.
Where do you want to start?
All right, so this is an interesting one. I think there's a lot going on about how creative is transforming at the moment, particularly as we work with different technology challenges at the moment. But I'm quite curious to pick your brains on what do you think is one myth that's out there with your teams, with your clients, one myth that's really interesting about digital transformation that you think is holding people back?
Digital transformation or digital transformation in the face of AI?
Sure. Well, is there any difference these days?
I think so. And it's something, this is well worn, so you're going to have to hit me back on this because I've already said this 100 times. On LinkedIn, I see nonstop people posting. Now there's the Google announcements that were out there, the Figma announcements with everything where it's, oh, you can make this app really simple, or sorry, simply, right? You can make this app, this website, this thing. And again, it's going back to that replacing designer type of situation or replacing UX. I tend to think that's just, I don't know if it's a myth. I think it's the times are a-changing. I just don't see it replacing. And here's why. I've talked about this before. The bottom will fill up with the Squarespace designer, but at the top, when you average everything out, you get by default mediocre. Mediocre gets you 80% of the way there. You need the depth and the craft to get to the end. That to me is one of the biggest myths. That's number one. The second thing is that looking forward for the next few years, we are going to be using these devices that are sitting next to me. And that's where all the AI tools are at the moment, right? Because it's trained off some sort of knowledge and data. It knows what a bank app looks like, what a travel app looks like. So you say, create a travel application for my iPhone. It is going to do that. You create a website, whatever, a bank website. It is going to do that. When it comes to voice, different types of input, output, new glasses, augmented reality glasses, there are so many new types of user experiences that are going to be generated by this confluence of technologies that is coming together. I think that's the myth. It's great. Actually, it's wonderful that we can create these first drafts of all these things because there is so much more to do.
Yeah. Okay. You got two things I'll pick up on there.
All right, go for it.
First one, let's do the device one because I think it's an interesting one. I think there is a drive at the moment, and I know you're quite a keen proponent of it, that we are going to do away with the screens at some point. The screens will become a thing of the past.
I think we'll do away with the phone and not screens. Screens will just move.
So I'm not sure, and I'll tell you why I think it's a challenge is because at the moment with the phone, for example, we have something which is very multi-purpose. And I think we see new devices, new interfaces coming up like smartwatches, like glasses, which are very good typically for a very narrow set of use cases. Whereas the phone is actually very good for quite a broad set of use cases. I haven't seen anything yet, even with the newer stuff that's coming out, that I think will replace everything in terms of convenience, in terms of breadth of access, depth of access, with the same user capability, the same intuitive interface designs that I think we've seen with the phone. I think it's going to be a very tough ask to do away with it completely.
I can see where you're getting that. What I'm wondering is right now I feel like when I go to a phone, everything is sandboxed, right? I have the phone and then I have apps and there are things that work within that. If we look to a post-application type of future, when I go into a travel application, a banking application, a health application, I almost never, ever need the full application. I need a piece of it. I need a component of it. If we can take that component and make it available when I need it, let's say in a glasses display Or from an audio perspective, I go to a bank application to check my balance. I can do that audio. I go to a travel site to, let's say, check how much a hotel is or how much a flight is or what time a flight is. I can do that audio. So I would start to look at it that way. If we look at it from a post-application, it becomes components that I can use because I only actually ever go to applications to use 2% or 3% of that application.
Yep.
Make that available on demand. I think you're going to see a vastly different style and set of user experiences.
I think it's good to have an opinion, even if it's not correct. But
these are your opinions most of the time that are not correct.
So let me tell you why I
mine are
disagree.
great ones, but tell me why you're wrong.
So I'll give you a good example. When Windows came out, and I'll date myself now, there was a constant push at the time to create a 3D version, 3D interfaces for Windows, and it never ever took off. Lots of people tried different things, but the simple fact, it wasn't as convenient, it wasn't as fast, it wasn't as easy to use as a 2D interface. And I strongly believe that, yes, you could use audio to look at your bank balance, for example, but actually you probably don't use one narrow use case there. You've probably got about 3 that you're looking at the time. So for example, how much money have I got? What was the last 2 or 3 transactions that I made? Have I got that payment that I'm looking to make next week? Have I actually set it up? Is it scheduled? You're right. You don't do everything at once, but it's a narrow set. And to do that with audio, it's nowhere near as fast.
Let me push back.
Okay.
Because I agree with what you said. If I go to a banking application, it will be, yes, I want to understand maybe what I have left, my most recent transaction. With HSBC here, when I spend something, it sends me a text message.
Yep.
And it says the vendor I spent it at, how much I spent, and my remaining balance. That is done in maybe 20 words or less. And that could be, again, an audio, and I get all
Could be.
of
You'd
that
go
information.
mad within a day if you did that. Though.
No, but I don't need it every time I do it, but I could query and ask for it. And so then I'll throw it back at you with this. We've talked about this before. You have on one side these large language models, ChatGPT, Gemini, and you have the command line, sort of the terminal, the one box where people are prompt engineers. And then you have the other side of Google where people search. But these are coming together.
Yeah.
And so I wonder, the more that they come together and you get search, query, find, build, create, all of these in one, does that make it easier for me to ask a question and get an output in a verbal point of view? I'm tripping over my words a bit,
I get that.
but it's the idea that the input has changed, and I think the output can change based on that.
I'm quite interested, you just made me think of something. I'm quite interested as we move towards this, well, it's a bit of a logical jump here, but
Go for it.
as we move towards more agentic usage and the whole idea of moving beyond apps, whatever device they're on, to using these intelligent devices that work for us, intelligent software that works for us, agents, if we could get to a point of customizing how we interact with them. And I like, audio's great. So audio as an interface could be potentially good, but I don't think it's been done very well to date. And we have problems when you think about instant messaging on laptops and things. I have 10 different things going on. Something goes ping and I'm like, which one is that? Is that Facebook? Is that LinkedIn? Is that messaging? And often the time I give up and I don't know. And I go to my phone to give me a trigger. What's the latest notification? Because on my computer, I've got so many windows open, I have no idea. If we could move to a form where we are more reliant on agents and we can customize our inputs and our outputs. So we say, actually, I've got 4 audio noises and I choose what they are. I get a bit more inclined to think that audio could be useful in a fast way if we've got a little bit more control.
I'll bounce 2 things back at you. The first, what you just mentioned, I get that ping, right? And I don't know where it came from. That is a situation of sonic branding. And I would argue that the majority of user experience people tend to think of user experience in a very narrow band.
Yep.
They think of it as a screen on a device. If you think of the totality of the experience, you're going to start to incorporate a lot more sonic branding.
Yeah.
What you just talked about, that voice hasn't been done very well. I 100% agree. I personally don't use voice a lot. I tend to dictate. I also think that's because within the realm of user experience, people haven't really explored a lot of what makes up this new post-app totality of experiences. Personality design, agent design in terms of not just a bit of code, but what does that agent mean from a brand and story perspective? There's all these things that I think you can extend when you get into audio, when you get into augmented reality, when you get into whether you want to say the metaverse. That user experience is just cusping over and figuring out, oh, we need these new skills. And I do think they are new skills. The other thing that I would say, because there is two things there, the sonic branding and then the extension of skills. The second thing is I think audio or voice is cultural.
Unpack that a bit.
Sure. So I personally hate, maybe hate's a strong word, strongly dislike audio messages on WhatsApp. But within some cultures, they are hugely used and useful, and that is the default. Or for some people, that is how they like to work. That's what I'll throw back at you. So is it a situation of it not working or it not working for you?
Yeah, I think it's a bit of both. So I had a recent conversation with a friend who does a lot more audio messaging than I do. And I was previously in the same camp as you. I don't like it. It's not my preferred medium.
Well, that friend needs to go.
Let me tell you, the problem I've got, and I've changed since I've moved to Dubai actually, is I've realized that I can't send text messages while I'm driving, but I can record a voice message.
Yes.
And I can do that quite safely without taking my eyes off the road. So I tend to do that a lot. And I've realized that half the voice messages I get are from people in similar situations, that they've got a long drive, they want to interact, and they don't want to do it in a dangerous way. So they send me a voice message. And I actually quite like that. It's quite nice. It feels a lot safer to do that than trying to read something while you're driving. So there's a good use case there. But the problem I found is, and I talked about this with my friend, is that when you have a long conversation like this, particularly when you're talking about things you're going to do, I can't then go back to that conversation and scan through the notes and say, okay, he said that. I need to look it up and refer to it. I've got to listen to a 10-minute message.
But that is a technology and feature issue. If I look at Microsoft Teams, for example, it transcribes everything. Yeah. Why can't I just go into WhatsApp if I have a whole list,
it's a good suggestion,
the last few weeks of audio messages, and say, find me the audio message where I said this and put me at the time code of it.
Or even better, stick it into a vector database so I can query semantically on this topic, tell me everything I've talked about in the last 6 months that's relevant, and give me a recommendation of who to go to next.
But this is exactly what I mean, where I think user experience as we define it right now is too narrow.
Yeah.
Because it's those types of things that I think user experience designers don't automatically think about, but they need to. Because all of this is coming, right?
It is.
Coming or here. But it's these extensions that the skills that we have are going to change. And I would put forth the argument, a lot of user experience designers, I think, are going to act as if they can do all these things. Oh, since I'm a user experience designer, I can also do audio branding, sonic work. I can do voice work. I can do personality work. No, if you look at development of a game, people divide all of these tasks up. Yeah. Character design, character personality, character movement, rigging, animation, all these things. Within our field, I think we need to explode the skill set much more as we develop new, whatever these AI devices are. I would like to see maybe a larger set or a larger team of user experience individuals where they have more niche type of skills in order to get to the craft level, that top 10% of the craft. So if we tie it together, if we go back to the start, AI can do 80% of the first draft, get us all the way there. And you have this extended team of very deep, knowledgeable individuals who can craft and tweak the final results to really make something stand apart.
Yeah. Do you know what I really like about this is that it's coming back to a very human way of behaving. I won't say thinking, but behavior. It's very mapped to how we are as mammals, as animals, in terms of how we visually perceive things, how we listen to audio, how we even feel emotionally, but also how we're going to other areas like scent, for example. And one of the big things that came to me when I moved to Dubai, or I came out to Dubai 10 years ago, was that every shopping center has a scent.
Yes.
And that makes sense. It's weird to me, but it absolutely makes sense.
I love it. I do absolutely love that. And someone designs that. And it is so well done.
Yep.
And I'm really glad you brought that up because it's such a good moment of things that you see here in Dubai that you just don't see in other places.
And maybe they're there, but they're not as overt. But
You see it at Disney. Right? Disney will pump, I think it was in some of their shops, they'll pump in scent of like fresh baked cookies.
really,
But that's the only place I've really heard of it done until you get here. And then you start to recognize common sense, or you walk into a building and you'll have that scent and it's part of the experience.
yeah, that's it. It is a part of the experience. We get very visually hung up on things, but there's so much more. I really think we're on the cusp of moving to something that is a lot more human, having been technology obsessed for so long. I think this whole idea of moving to genuinely connect with people as people, we're starting to see it with the new inspirational things that are coming up from, we talked last week about Jaz Ahmed, Studio One, how they've gone for a very human first approach. This week we've seen Johnny Ives with his Love From has announced a partnership with OpenAI. I'm excited to see what happens there. But it's all very human. It's all very much, let's put the technology back behind the scenes and let's focus on individual connection. I really like that.
I dig it as well. You had an entire novel on that phone. We just touched one question. What would be the second question?
Okay, all right. So there's a lot of talk at the moment about how can we use AI and machine learning effectively around data, which is great. It gives us a huge amount of power when we've got these big analytical engines that can ingest and spit out answers. How do you think you balance those with a creative design, with artistry to get a good answer? And what are some of the flaws that you might potentially see along the way?
I'll answer with a basic start, and then we'll see where we can take this. With any designer, and I've mentioned this before, with any designer creating any sort of experience, there's two things to think about in terms of data. The first one is, what data do I have to base the interface on? I am surprised, shocked, I'm not sure which, when designers create screens, and I see this broadly, I see this with every country that I work with, they tend to look at what's the job to be done, what's the use case, and they start to plug in content and they start to plug in whatever, titles, copy, numbers, images. And it is bereft of an understanding of what data do I have that's actually driving that interface.
Yeah.
If I were to look forward a few years, every designer should be asking to start, what data do I have to design this interface with? That should be a fundamental founding question. The second thing is, when you create an interface, create a design system, you need to think of what's your instrumentation strategy. What data am I collecting? Everything that we think about in terms of a personalization strategy, you need to collect the data and you need to think how that data is then used to personalize the experience that you have. If I want to go for the easiest examples, Netflix, YouTube. If you have bought a new computer, or if you have created a new YouTube account or created a new Spotify account, a new Netflix account, and you log in, it is absolutely shocking how useless and horrible the UI is, because you recognize how it is not attuned to you. That's the first part of how I treat data. And then if I had to go on with it...
Let me tell you the flip side. The flip side horror to that is when you've got young children, they use your Netflix account, your Spotify account, and rather than having your nicely curated set of programs that tapped into your personal preferences, I have, do you want to watch Danny Go? Do you want to listen to the Gummy Bears theme tune, which is some 2015 techno remix they found and won't stop playing? So there is that danger.
If I look at it from a different perspective, if I'm designing an experience, it's interesting to think about how you use data to capture attention. A lot of people want to monetize that. But it's also interesting to think about how I use data to, I don't want to say this is an ethical question, or sorry, an ethical way of thinking about it, but how do I use data to, let's say, generate joy? Since you talked about the human element. So I can see the skepticism in your face.
No, I'm 100%.
I
really agree with that.
I was just reading this book, Scary Smart, by, I think I'm going to butcher this poor gentleman's name, Mo Gaudat.
Yeah, I can't think who does it.
And
Yeah.
he used to work at Google, one of the sort of AI pioneering people. He was talking about how like he was on Instagram on the sort of the For You page, the search page, and he was working out. So he was like looking at workout stuff. And it was amazing how quick it changed to great looking men and women doing squats on everything. And then I recognized for myself how bad I started to feel about my body. And okay, now I had to really think, oh, no, I want to actively engage with content that makes me happier.
Yeah. Okay.
Most people don't think in that way. And a lot of times content gets to become rage bait, rage content. Things that don't make me a happier person, make me a better person, make me a more intellectually stimulated person. Most attention is gravitated towards the negative. We know this from the news and what the news needs to report. If you could use that data and as a designer, create an application or an experience that is reflective to get you towards a positive experience,
Yeah.
that could be something really powerful
No,
and
I
really
agree.
joyful.
I agree. And I think there's a very old quote which says you have the right to do anything. As people, we can do anything we choose to do. But it's really important not to let anything become the master of you. And it's very easy to fall into a trap where social media starts guide you down a route which you fall into rather than actively taking control. I'll come back to the question, which one of the things for me, I think when we've got all this breadth, this wealth of data that we can access, the danger is to try and use all of it, to try and pull it all together and to make sense of it. And there's 2 points that I use as a guide, which is one that I do think it's important when you've got the chaos of this amount of data available to you. It's very easy to fall into the trap that you can use statistics, you can use data to tell any story you like. But I do think that sort of chaos needs a choreographer. You need to have a way to put a path through some of this chaos that actually drives to something meaningful. And I think the other part to it is that I think as a creative, as someone who's building product, it's very tempting to look at what's out there at the moment and try and break every single mold. I think it's more important to do one thing really well and double down on that and do that great, and then step by step come at the rest, rather than try and boil the ocean.
I've been waiting to cough for a bit. You can edit that part out. Did you just come up with that chaos needs a choreographer line?
I quite like that.
I loved that. I love that. And I'm going to take us in a different direction for a moment because that just made me think of something. We go back to the agent conversation. Within this post-app world that I keep coming to, one of the challenges companies are going to have is you can create agents with this MCP layer that can go out and do anything. So I'm a bank. You can go out and get my fitness data, my travel data.
Yep.
So for example, I'm a bank and I can go out and get your travel itinerary data, and then I can make a budget for you, and I can spin up a digital card that you can put on Apple Pay, and you can give that to your kids or
Yep.
something. The thing is, when you can do anything, the need for, whether that's choreography or whether that is direction, the need for deciding what you can, should, want, I don't know what the proper sort of word is there, but deciding what needs to happen from a brand, from a story perspective. I'm already starting to run into clients on both the travel and the financial side that are just spinning because they're like, what can we do with agents? And they just keep generating tens, and then it becomes hundreds of use cases. And you're like, yeah, this is going to be a problem when you can do everything and anything. What actually makes sense to do?
But working with you and working with people like you, it's been a really good lesson for me to know that there's layers to this, and there's what are your business objectives, or what are you actually trying to achieve, and they're looking at how you map your potential use cases to that. But far below that, you've got what are the business principles, the values that sit behind that organization that you can stay true to. I think those are your guides to decision making, and I think it's really good to come back to those, to revisit them. I think they quite often find you that path through the noise.
I like that because it reinforces something I like, which is, as whether you want to say designers or strategist, it all becomes about the decision-making framework and how you work within a framework to get an outcome that makes sense for the business. So we've touched on 2 questions.
Let me pick up on something you said a minute ago.
Okay. I'll wait to get to the third. We're going to do a third question, and then we're going to move on to the news of the week.
Yeah, let's do that. So You talked a little bit about personalization and data behind individuals that we now have greater access to than we ever did before. When do you think it gets to a point where it stops being personalization, starts becoming more like surveillance, and how do we tread a careful path through that?
I'm finally reading The Age of Surveillance Capitalism.
Oh, I don't know that one.
Oh, that's like a foundational book
Okay.
that I've been putting off because it's quite a long one. It's about how you use the information, right? So I can personalize something that provides a joyous or a better experience for me.
Yeah.
I can provide a personalized experience that makes me better from an education, from an intellect point of view, makes me a happier person. We have not been doing that. We haven't really done that. I don't know if it'll go forward. So the difference to me is you have all this data. It's how do you use it? Do you use it in a way that brings joy and brings some sort of positive element to a person's life? Or do you use it to influence somebody towards a capitalistic outcome or towards a controlling outcome? And you can do either of those, but
okay.
it just depends on where you want to take it. But that's the difference how I see that.
I think for me, it's about transparency. I think
Oh, good call.
there's a difference, I think, between seeing these personalization tools, if you're the business, as something that you're using to decide what to show me because it suits your interest, versus giving me a tool as a user that controls what I see. And an example for you is, let's say Facebook. I'm too old for TikTok. But Facebook, the content I see on that, it would be great if there was a little toggle on there or a set of filters I could choose to say, show me uplifting content. Don't show me anything which is going to make me angry or annoy me or drive a negative reaction. Give me a set of emotional controls that I can, or dials that I can set on this to control my feed. You're still showing me content based on what you think I want to see, but it allows me the control there, and then I can control my feed.
So that's the surveillance capitalism side, right? Because if I do indeed say, show me things that are joyous or show me things that are more intellectual,
Yeah.
I can take a guess I might not stick with scrolling as long.
Oh, that's
I
interesting.
might not give as much attention because I keep scrolling to see things that
Surprise.
frustrate me,
Yeah, okay.
angry. And
We're horrible humans.
again, I go back to why is the news the news? If you look at the books written on the long arc of social history, we live in a safer time. We live in a healthier time, right? We are doing better by any stretch of the imagination within our lives. And yet everybody feels more anxious. Everybody feels like they are about to die from everything.
We have the same complaints that people had 3,000 years ago. I think it's Seneca complaining about the youth of the time. It's the same complaint.
Yeah, but the thing is, we're all better off, but we all think we're not.
Yeah.
Because what is presented to us on the news is death, war, famine, violence, etc. But that's what gets us to tune in. People don't tune into the news to see the joyous elements. They have the one segment on the news that'll be like Dunbar's people, and it will have a joyous
Wonderful
moment.
human beings.
Right? Yeah. Oh, I did this 2-minute segment with this. It's the feel-good moment, and now it's back to murder.
But maybe it's not a black and white. Maybe it's a skew towards it. So you go from 80% is the stuff you're asking about, that 20%.
Yes. But I like what you're saying there. I think that's how you could use data better. If you come from a perspective of what's going to get you attention, and then you need attention in order to monetize, in order to do advertising. Yeah.
I don't know. It's
I think we
interesting.
need to have a level of personal responsibility there because
agree.
companies won't. Like you just know it. They need to produce shareholder value.
Until you can
We need to
demonstrate
have
that
it.
there's value in it. I think that's the thing. I'd love to see an A/B test on that to say if you were able to skew it like that, how does it net out?
Man, but we know that, let's say, when I wake up, we know how to get natural dopamine in terms of being in nature or exercising or accomplishments that take time to do things. And yet we go for the quick dopamine hit of scroll, anger. So I think we know these things. So we have a natural A/B test. What we keep going back to over and over again in the last months that we've done this, growth takes discomfort. People don't like discomfort by the fact that it is discomfort. So there you go.
Yeah, it's interesting. Do you know, I saw a study this week, you'll hate this, that links dopamine production to potentially higher testosterone levels in men. So there is an argument that to say that TikTok will lead to gains in the gym. So there is that limited amounts of TikTok.
I'm not sure it's helping my gym gains, but it is helping my time between sets.
Yeah, okay.
Let's do a third question quickly.
All right. Let's see what I've got. Okay. I've got a couple, but I think this is...
You only get one now. You only get one. We can do others in the coming weeks.
All right. I'll do this one. We'll save the other one for later. So what's one human moment that you think should never be replicated by AI or technology? Because we try and do it a lot at the moment, particularly when we're trying to automate steps as we use agents. But what's one thing you think we need to step back from?
I don't know if I agree with this, especially as you look at the metamaterials that are being produced. And what I mean by metamaterials are like man-made materials that have organic properties to them.
Yeah, okay.
I'll come back to that. In a lot of my reading on health, wellness, lifespan, and aging, what I have been surprised about in terms of my own learning is I think it's oxytocin and how that is built or generated based on physical touch.
Yep. You don't want a hug from a robot?
I'm not a hugger. And this is my thing is I'm not a hugger, but that could go back to whatever, how I was raised and all this type of stuff. But I think there are natural chemical reactions that we have in the body that have been built up over hundreds and thousands of years of evolution. And the specific thing that I was going towards is child and mother. And that was the one thing that I was like, if I could probably choose something in someone's life not to replace, it's that early bonding moments of like birth to 3 or 4 years old where you have these family moments. And I know this is a weird thing.
It's a very deep answer.
It's a weird thing for me to say, especially since don't want kids and I don't have this. But it has changed my opinion as I have read more and more.
Yeah, okay. That's interesting. You made me think of those managers who make a point of making physical contact with you when you know they've got an agenda there. That drives me up the wall, and I try not to be inauthentic like that. But do you know what? I've got a slightly less deep answer that I would put back to you to
Okay.
a little more shallow. But I think one thing I think we need to be careful about is these easy answers that we get from artificial intelligence, the quick, immediate response. You put a question into ChatGPT and you instantly get the answer out. There's no delay there. There's no pause, digestion, consideration. There's no real backwards and forwards. And that discussion, that time to think, I think we are in danger of losing versus easy answers, easy dopamine-fueled answers.
But is that something that, okay, so the thing that you were asking, what can't be replicated, is the idea that at some point there is a diminishing return of driving efficiency. Is that how I can put that? Because everybody wants things faster, and I will equate that to efficiency at the moment.
Assuming that the right answer is the fast answer, the first answer, and we've talked about that before, that it might not necessarily. I'll tell you, here's another snippet for you. I think there is a genuine consideration that friction is not counterintuitive to flow, but actually, whilst it might slow down flow, it might slow down the route to answers, actually friction and interaction will get you to a better place.
Okay, I am having a hilarious flashback. One of my great old creative directors I used to work with, this woman, Lily, we were working on a program and she brought up that exact situation. We were working on, I think it was a messaging program or how to connect with people. And we were trying to, how do we make this, again, easier, more efficient? And she brought up this idea of, I think friction, I don't know if it makes a relationship, but it is a powerful tool within that. And the example that we arrived at, I don't like phone calls, period. I don't. If my girlfriend calls me, I pick up and I'm happy to talk. Or I'm happy within the realm of people calling me. And I will take that call. I don't take calls from anybody else unless it's like a work call and I'm on work time. I hate calls. I really do. But girlfriend calls, yeah, I'm going to pick up. I think that level of friction, there is something there that when you introduce friction, there is, I don't know if it's a bond. I'm not having a cogent point here, but I'm trying to get to something that is ephemeral to me.
Do you know what strikes me is I get really annoyed with ChatGPT at the moment, where I ask it a question, it tells me how great that question is, or I tell it a
I've heard
position, and
this.
it comes back and it tells me, oh, that's a brilliant idea. I'm like, no,
It's love bombing you.
Exactly. It drives me crazy. I don't know if it's just my perverse, desperate need to kick back, but I need to argue with people to get to a good answer I believe in.
So if I come to what you were saying with things that technology or AI can't replace, that diminishing return on thinking. And we've talked about this in the past few episodes. Let machines be machines and let humans be humans. There is a critical difference that machines have a much higher bandwidth for communication. We have a much lower bandwidth. We can think a lot, but then we're limited by language.
128 bits. 128 bits is what we can process.
We're limited by just sentences and language, and machines aren't. We are limited by the need to sleep, by the need to connect with others, social environment. Machines are not. They can just loop forever. Instead of trying to say what is being replaced, it is what are the deltas between these and how do you build each one up?
Yeah.
So if I go back to that time to think, at some point there is a diminishing return about the speed of which you can just think through things, and that's okay. So much of the time that we can think as humans, we can generate new ideas, and every innovation and disruption has just been multiple ideas merged together to generate another idea, whether that's lateral thinking or whatever
Nothing
that is,
new
right?
under the sun.
No, there's not. Everything is just Lego blocks that are built together. You need the time to figure out what Lego blocks click to figure out what comes next.
Do you know what I found interesting this week, actually, I noticed it, is that I've started to get a habit of when I go out to do the school run, for example, I know I've got to go and drive somewhere, I've got to step away from the computer, which I hate doing in the middle of a thought process. I'll stick a question into ChatGPT or any large language model. I'll stick a question in for what the next step is and say, tell me this. And then I'll walk away without looking at the answer. What I quite often find is that I'll be sat in the car driving, thinking about the answer, and that time away from the screen forcing me to think makes me come up with what I want to do next. And I get back to the computer, look at the answer, go, yeah, that's rubbish. I'm going to go with what I thought of myself. But that act of stepping away and that feeling that I've got a machine working in the background to keep things moving is quite reassuring.
This is what I do every morning when I take my morning walk. It is why I hold my morning walk as something that I have to carve out and keep time for. It is the time that I can actually reflect on something. And maybe I'll listen to an audiobook, maybe I'll listen to music, but it is that time to think, because once the day hits, I struggle with it. Everybody's pinging me. So I think you have to set up that time.
Very smart. Let's go back to what we were talking about earlier then, the events of this week.
Yeah, okay. That was perfect, because I was about to say that too. Events of the week. Where do you want to start?
Let's talk about the OpenAI and Johnny Ive thing. What are your thoughts on that? And I'll tell you, my position is obviously everyone's a big fan of what Johnny Ive did with Apple. Where do you think it's going now, and how much do you think, is this still the relevant person to be looking to?
When you have successful products, like all the stuff that Apple produced and Johnny produced, I think it comes from a tag team.
Yes.
I will bring this back to bands. If we saw this, right? When Slash exited Guns N' Roses, it was like, excellent friends. And it wasn't quite as popular. When Bruce Dickinson left Iron Maiden, it's like neither of them were as popular as when they were together. If Kirk Hammett were to go off and do something outside of Metallica, it just wouldn't be as popular. It is the chemistry of individuals that generates anything great. I don't know what to expect.
Let me use a rock analogy.
Okay. Wait. Let me throw you one thing back. With what Johnny Ive has done thus far, has anything come close to Apple?
Okay. So I'd argue that there's lots of things which have caught up, but there's nothing which has taken a similar size leap. And I think that is a big deal. But I think you give me a great analogy to come back with, which is the whole rock band thing. If you look at the Stones, they did a lot in terms of reinventing music at points where they were pushing back against expectations. But you also look at what they've done for the last 30 years, and they haven't really done anything desperately novel or new. So the fact that they did something great once or twice is not necessarily an indicator that they are right people to innovate now.
It's a moment in time.
Yeah.
It is not just about the people. It's about the chemistry of the people
Yes.
and the context that those people sit within.
Yes.
Do I, like, let's take Sundar Pichai or Satya Nadella or Steve Jobs. There is probably 100 or 1,000 people who are that smart, that good. They're just at the wrong point in the wrong situation. With whatever it is, half the world is connected. That means there's 4 billion people not connected. You're telling me there's not another genius CEO or somebody who has the potential to be a genius CEO. They're probably all over the place. It's just they don't have the right place, right time, context. I think that's incredibly important. This is what you just asked. This is why when everybody was up in arms, it was about a decade ago, right? Meta's a monopoly.
Yeah.
And you would hear all these things. Microsoft is a monopoly. And then here comes OpenAI and Deep Research and all these things that are popping up. Or sorry, DeepSeek. DeepSeek. All these things that are popping up. Now, the problem is the larger companies have enough money where they can go and buy them,
Yes.
which does create a
And where they can take
monopoly
risks
and a moat.
as well, which helps a lot.
However, the idea that technology or just business, for the most part, is generational. So what was successful in one generation, the next generation generally doesn't tend to stay on top.
Yeah.
Right? Like how many of the top stores you had Sears, gone to the side, right? Like how many of whatever the top businesses 50 years ago are the top businesses now? And 20 or 30 years from now, how many will be the top businesses have a natural arc?
Yep.
It is impressive to see Microsoft now do 50 years, I think it was.
Is it really well?
Wow. Was it 50? Yeah, I think so.
It might be.
Yeah,
It might
no,
well
that
be,
would make sense. Yeah.
IBM, I'm
But
guessing, is getting
companies don't have like infinite power. Eventually, somebody will come up with something new
Yep.
and nudge them off.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think we've got a tendency in human society to latch on that thing which gives us rewards. We see it in Hollywood where they'll just remake films or extend ideas until it stops making them quite as much money as they hoped. And I think we have a tendency to go with the safe object. Someone who's done it before is not a bad bet to see whether they can do it again. But is it the exciting team, the exciting ideas that are going to break the envelope? Let's see what comes.
You probably need a conversation, right? I'm sorry, combination, not conversation, combination. If I look to, so I'm a big professional wrestling fan, so I look to wrestling. You need new stars that are built up. So the people now with Roman Reigns and Jacob Fatu and all these new people, but you still bring The Rock back from time to time because yay, nostalgia, right?
Wow.
There's this trusty source, but if you brought The Rock back every single week, would it work? You'd probably get a little tired of it.
Yeah.
You want something new. So I do agree, there's a level of safety that's built in, but will it generate the next big thing? I'm not sure. I don't know. What do you think? I've been talking a lot. You tell me.
Wrestling's an interesting one because I'd say you change the faces, but the faces and the heels, but is the formula behind it? Has that desperately changed in like the last 20, 30 years, do you think? Or is it essentially working a machine that they know is effective?
I would say, yes, it has.
I don't know it well enough to say.
So, yes, and if you look at the larger story of wrestling, there's different styles, and different styles have been popular at different times. There is still the standard story arc that always works. So there's always this kernel at the center that always works. But if I go back 30 years ago when wrestling, or longer, 50 years ago, when wrestling was a protected industry, right, and everybody worked under kayfabe, right, this idea that it was real. And then you came to the mid-90s, and it was, okay, everyone's, this isn't really real.
It's a soap opera.
Yeah, it's predetermined. So then we got the Attitude Era, which is where Vince McMahon shifted.
That's what I know better.
Yeah. Shifted and said, okay, we're going to start mixing the way that we do stories. We're going to have more outlandish stories.
Okay.
Then you come into the era now where we're going to expose more of the business and we're going to show the training, the feeder, the development territory of it. So the kernel remains the same, but the business around it changes.
Okay. It's interesting. It's interesting. It's something I've never been too close to, but you've got to have a level of admiration for the athleticism that goes into it. And you see it when they cross over into other things. But I'm always very curious about it because it does feel like a machine that churns out stuff, but it does it in a very tailored way.
So if I bring it back to tech, like your kernel there's always a job to be done.
Yeah.
There's always the task that I need to complete.
Is it the same approach? I think that's my question.
I think there's multiple ways that you approach it, but that's the kernel, right? In wrestling, story is the kernel. In music, the song is the kernel. You can look at Metallica, that they are a business and a touring machine. Sure. Rammstein, the same. You can say Lady Gaga or whatever, but you still need the song. Yeah. You still need that kernel, and you can build around that talent. But how you create and craft that business takes different forms, and it changes all the time. Were you the one that brought up the ABBA thing to me?
No, sadly, no. That sounds good.
Oh, no, somebody I work with. So they have this whole ABBA show. Then it's all like holograms.
Okay, yeah, I've seen that.
Right? And I'm like, but this isn't the real band. But it's the kernel, it's the song, and they have put technology around it. That is what I would tie it back to.
Yeah, interesting.
You still have the job to be done. That's the kernel, but the way that you approach it, the business around it, can change and change and change.
Okay. So the execution change, the approach might stay the same.
So there you go.
Yeah, very nice. Good.
Cool. Wrap up for this week. We're
good.
solid. All right, man.
Good job.
We'll talk to you next week. Thank you.